Welcome to the Off the Cuff podcast. My name is Danny, and this
is Shaun Devoy.
Devoid of a soul. He calls me the demonic pinhead, so when I shave my head, that is. So he gets to be called devoid of a soul.
In a manner of speaking, yes.
So I almost forgot. For some reason, we're recording on camera, even though, which makes sense. And I somehow already forgot that.
Wow.
11 years of doing YouTube will do that to you, I guess. So, today, I guess we're going to speak on the U.S. educational system.
Or the lack thereof.
Pretty much. We're going to try to, because we haven't recorded a podcast in a long time, and we haven't done it with this microphone, we're going to try to start doing the spliff, or the Jehovah's Witness Passover event,
exactly.
Passing the bread and the wine between each other and the likes of the microphone.
Exactly.
The producer's dildo, no.
Anyways, when it comes to the educational system, or rather the lack thereof, the fact is we've got a lot of critiques on it. For starters, I actually believe that it's actually based off of the puritanical Christian organization of having a pastor at the front.
Interesting take on that one. But obviously, like you said, we have a ton of critiques, especially considering, personal experience is a really big one for us, because we both actually have been through the special educational system. So in other words, we actually both started, at least. I actually got put into mainstream, is what the normal school is called, and halfway through first grade. But I got put temporarily back into it in fourth grade for like a third of the year. And obviously, I think we can both say that also didn't really help either of us either. It was kind of dumb. I will say one positive experience I got out of that, though, was the fact that I actually got to go to a special education. That sounds very Nazi German. The way I'm about to describe this, I got to go to a special education camp. Summer camp during the summers in kindergarten and first grade, and I think second grade as well. Through second grade, which was called Camp Rivendell, out here on the west side of the Portland area, which is atop Cooper Mountain. I don't know why I air quoted that. It's literally called Cooper Mountain. What the hell did I do that for? Cooper Mountain. Okay, apparently I don't know. I guess it's just it's a pimple on the ground anyway. So to be fair, I guess that's a mountain. What the hell was I going this? Right. So yeah, I did have a positive experience with Camp Rivendell, because that was extremely fun. I actually still have a year-end Camp Rivendell thing. Actually, I think it's over here on my right. But that has pictures of the various different groups, because obviously there's multiple different groups. Some of them were for like Down syndrome and mentally retarded or stunted, and then there was other ones that were for like strictly like super anger issue kids, and ones that were delinquent. And then there was another one, which was my group, which was for the quote unquote mentally ill and or specially educated or potentially autistic. So usually we would end up in that group. And so of course it was amalgamation of all the the vagrant minds of the childhood world. But no, it was actually a lot of fun and really cool. So there's one positive experience at least I got out of that. But in terms of actual education, there was like no value in it at all, really.
So speaking of what was it called? The educational experience. The only kind of educational experience that I found of value was basically my graduation. Yeah, my graduation. Other than that, no. When it came to education in general, most of my education came from
Another brick in the wall.
Exactly. No, actually it came from outside the educational system. Basically, I learned biblical Hebrew and language and all of that stuff through reading the Bible, learning how sentence structures work and all sorts of stuff like that.
You're self-taught, is what you're saying.
Basically, yeah. Self-taught. Other than that, my education system was also life in general.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Um, Other than that, yeah, basically I found no value in education at all, except for that and Greco-Roman philosophy.
I will say also that I, like, obviously for me, I would personally want to go into detail because it's the only way that my brain really operates in terms of like expressing things and making points about these kinds of topics. So like for me personally, a big issue was obviously how I learn, right? I throughout my entire time in school, I had told all my teachers, I told the guidance counselor, I told the principal, the vice principal, I told the school district administrators because my family and the school actually involved the school district's administrators, Beaverton School District here in Oregon, um, as well. And of course, my childhood psychiatrist, so my pediatric one, and then later on my the one I had the longest time that I have a very negative experience with. Actually, we could do an episode on fucking modern, yeah, the psychiatry in the U.S. especially. But anyway, uh, but yeah, the and then of course my parents, and I kept repetitively throughout my entire childhood, especially elementary school, telling them over and over and over again that I don't learn this way. Like I can't retain the information, and I don't know what I'm doing with a lot of these things. And the main topics that I'm by far the worst at are mathematics. That is the impractical form of math, aka the stuff that they teach in the curriculum at school. So your typical equations, your math tests, your SATs, any of that stuff where you have to do like written tests and all that. I was always god awful at. And then of course mainstream science. I was always terrible at that, especially chemistry. I could not, my brain just didn't function with that. But the thing I learned more modern day is the fact that uh I apparently am good at practical math. So, in other words, in life, where I'm not thinking about numbers that do not enter my head at all, nor do equations or any mathematical problems. I just immediately know the math just by doing whatever I'm doing. Like when I was first introduced to pool or billiards, whatever you want to call it, uh, I was still a kid, but I actually have never touched a pool cue before. I gotten close to a pool table, and nobody actually told me how it worked exactly. They gave me like the slightest overview of like, this is what makes pool. This is kind of the general idea how it works. It's almost like the motion of the balls and how you use the stick, and that's it. And then of course, the white ball is a scratch, and therefore you lose the game automatically. But that was it. So I immediately started playing, and I could already understand just by immediate observation, it's a game of angles. That's math. And I actually beat all three games I played that day. I beat all of the people who were like 50 plus who had been pool sharks even at one point in time or another. It was a family reunion. So what do you call that? Distant family, whatever what is it called again? Extended family,
Yeah.
on my mom's side. And they had played pool like almost religiously, and I still beat them every single time. And they weren't going easy on me either. Like, because they were competitive as hell. Both sides of my family are wildly competitive, so they take their shit very seriously, which I appreciate. But like, I just instantly was super fucking good at it, and they were just like, one of them was slack-jawed, and another one was just like remarking about like, how the hell are you that good? You should become a pool shark. And then I've been told that more recently again too. And then another way is with basketball. I actually, before the ball leaves my fingertips, I already know where the ball's going to go. I already know it's going to miss, and if it's going to miss, where it's going to hit, and that's where it's going to be. And I literally absentmindedly, just on autopilot, I'll point to where the ball's going to land before it even leaves the rim. So, like, these are examples of how I'm already good at math, just in the practical sense, but not the school sense.
So, yeah, in that sense, regarding the whole ordeal about how to learn, actually,
Yeah.
this is part of the reasoning why I made that determination in the first place about educational system is basically a byproduct of the church ordeal. That basically, so picture this. Basically, you've got in a church setting, which was the same as it was in the 1700s. The pastor is the guy who is sitting up there at the pulpit. Everyone else is down in the pews, sitting. The pastor's the one standing. In that sense, the teacher is the exact same way. He's the only one, he or she is the only one that is standing up there.
Yeah.
Everyone else is sitting. Why sitting? It's a good question.
Well, I would say at least it minimizes distractions, at least
True.
physically, because you're not using your motor
But
skills at that point.
But then that also begs the question: why is the teacher standing?
A lot of teachers sit, but it's usually once you get into like late high school or college for some
Exactly.
reason. I've never understood why if they're in elementary school they're almost always standing. My fifth grade teacher, Brad Silva, actually did sit most of the time though. He was my best teacher.
Yeah.
He was actually the hands-on one who actually took his time. He had a whole family. He took his time. The whole fifth grade school year, he took his time to actually, his off time, which he also needed to take to grade and everything else, let alone take care of himself and his family and his kids.
Yes.
He actually chose to dedicate time to me to try to help figure out how my brain worked and how I learned, and he walked me through that. But of course, he was also the only one who actually consistently sat. So it is an interesting observation. But not to cut you off, but if I can, when I was thinking of that with that,
please.
one of my thoughts was when you were saying that is that to the contrary though, that because if it's like the king in the pulpit is what my brain said, not the, which I mean, to be fair, like all came from like Roman Catholicism, so to be fair,
Exactly.
it kind of is like a king or emperor in a pulpit, or in you guys in the pulpit, or no, yeah, he's in the pulpit and you're in the pews. To that point, if that was true, then that would mean that the prison system is also the same. And if you were that simplified about it, anybody could argue, yeah, that's the case. Because they have the warden, and he's the top of the whole hierarchy.
Exactly.
And then he has his clergy, quote unquote, which are the rest of the admin and the lead guards, security for the prison. And then, of course, there's everyone else.
Exactly.
The janitors, and then there's the prisoners.
Yes.
But that's if you oversimplify it like that.
True.
But if you think about really how the incarceration system in the U.S. works, that's actually, you can't really truly compare it to a theological system like a religion necessarily.
Here's the basis by which that I'm making that distinction in that regard. When it came to, what was it called? So in this sense, I'm sort of a scholar, a big time buff in the ancient Near East, basically.
Yep.
Here I am a Jew and stuff. So the, what was it called?
Religiously a Jew, not ethnically.
Yes. Religiously.
He's ethnically extremely Scottish.
Exactly.
As the English would say, offensively Scottish.
Yes, exactly. Offensively Scottish. Anyways, the fact of the matter is, one of the things that has been taught in the Jewish worldview is that basically no one stands. No one does. Basically, it's
they call it respect, but what it really is compliance.
Exactly.
In other words, this is the hierarchy, and you acknowledge you are beneath me.
Exactly.
As a leader, yeah.
Yeah. Now, with that stated, inside of a traditional synagogue, basically, they made their way to the synagogue on Shabbat and all of that stuff. Basically, everyone gave commentaries. Everyone gave commentaries on their supposed reading of that week of the Torah or whatever. There was a guide who basically kept things isolated to the Torah and stuff like that, but ultimately he didn't make points.
Yeah.
He didn't spoon feed you doctrine in that regard. Basically, each person had their own worldview, which they could interject and stuff like that. Right. And everyone learned from one another in that regard. In fact, that's literally what the Talmud ultimately is. It's literally 2,000 years of opinions.
It's the world's first infinite op-ed.
Exactly.
Opinion editorial.
Exactly.
New York Times, eat your fucking heart out.
Exactly. New York Times, eat your heart out. But yes, the fact is that when this whole system in and of itself came into being, one of the things that struck me as odd is that I learned that there was at least 3 different methods of learning. There's kinetic. There's what else is there? In mind, what was it again? What are the 3 forms of learning, man?
the problem is everyone has a different term for each of them.
Exactly.
And a different understanding or
But
criteria for what fits each.
Ultimately,
like I would argue, what is kinetic? Is that
true.
Isn't kinetic like the physical learning
Exactly.
in person? Okay,
exactly.
So the practical learning.
Yes.
Versus the one in the head. I'm assuming your meaning is like the one that they usually do in the curriculum at schools here.
Exactly.
Which is that you just sit there and you get told this is what this test is, and then you just test. A lot of times in the U.S. school system, whether it's a private school or not, so a higher end school or not, you'll find that the teachers and the admin of a school will actually get mad at a student, even if they do they follow the rules of a test or of an assignment correctly, and they do it exactly to a T, but they still make it their own. Exactly. Because the answers or the way that what they said wasn't aligned with what the school administration wanted or required of them to say. It suddenly is rejected and they get like a failing grade because it's like you didn't, and or just like retaliation because you did not do what they in their head said you had to do. So only the ones that pass are not the ones who do a good job of their work and do good research or anything else. Exactly. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do with, did you comply with what I expect you to write and say? Are the answers the ones that I already had preordained in my head or in the context of the curriculum? Are those boxes checked off?
Exactly.
If not, you're failed. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, my brother Mario had actually experienced that in a private school that is the Portland Arts and Communications at the time. They had just gotten a new administrator at that time when he entered it, and that administrator I think lasted like 3 years, but they were like a complete tyrant about that kind of thing. So they even stifled the actual creativity wow. of their own students, which is like,
wow,
why do you call yourself arts and communications exactly. if you stifle that intentionally? But yeah, so I just wanted to make that point to that.
Exactly. But I mean, ultimately, heck, even in that regard, when it comes to science in that regard, one of the first immutable laws of science is that basically you have theory. Ultimately, theory is not fact.
That's one thing that, although that it semi-diverges off of the educational topic, because that's just talking about science at that point. But mainstream science is what I always like to emphasize, mainstream science, because there's also quantum science. Quantum science is old world or old school science, even like of the 60s, 70s, and a little bit into the 80s, because that was real science that actually acknowledged that there's only theory, aka a educated or even well-educated guess. Exactly. And that science is one of the key foundations is that it's not to prove something necessarily, but more to try to disprove something that has been proven many times over, because they want to see if they can form cracks. If they can form cracks in a certain theory that was believed to be factually correct about whatever the heck it might be, it could literally be anything, then that proves it's not solid anymore, and therefore it's not necessarily truly, you can't claim it's factual, because if there's cracks that form when you scrutinize it, it's going to prove that there's something missing, that there's something inaccurate in it, and that now you have to figure it out, which is one of the good things about real science like that. Of course, quantum science therefore goes into everything well beyond the material.
True.
Whereas mainstream modern science is all about material everything and foundations, and that's why they have this whole thing called science fact, because they're more worried about appeasing a human ego and mind, which is, I need familiarity, I need all this other, material, physical stuff. If I don't have that, it has to be impossible.
Exactly.
Because otherwise, God forbid, you go into an existential crisis. Or you just immediately get thrown in a psych ward for an evaluation because you don't, you're not obeying the mainstream and the bootlicking the mind that as everyone else agrees upon certain things or whatever. And that's why quantum science is better than mainstream. That's why I emphasize that. But that's also why I really hate mainstream science, modern mainstream science, because most of it's actually inaccurate and or it's fraudulent. It's fabricated out of thin air, because there's a big amount of PACs and all these other corporations or other rich interests that go and they pay for these studies to output, what they want them to output. So that it favors them, so they have a better bottom line and they have a bigger monopoly. It's really frustrating. We can see that rampant today, which of course makes all of us lunatics and all of our conspiracy theorists, of course, because that would never be true. Yeah. Much like all the people walking into Nazi Germany said at the time. All the Germans were like, that'll never happen to us. We wouldn't let that happen. And guess what happened? They sleepwalked themselves right in, apathetically. Because, well, it's absolutely factually correct. I mean, this would never happen to us, and it did. So
Exactly.
it's not actually science, it's opinion.
Yeah, it's opinion. But yeah, or rather, they're parroting what.
Or what the special interest funded.
Yes.
They find in their research, yeah.
Yes. But yeah, ultimately, that's literally the same thing that, what was it called? The same thing that even history is based off of. Like recently, I was, what was it called? Watching a video of, this guy who supposed that there was that the society, the Sumerians, if you will, that they actually created a system, know that there was at least 12 planets in our solar system. So it makes you wonder, how the heck did they come up with that? Because even though science, or rather historical fact, says it can't happen.
What do you mean it can't happen? In terms
Well,
of the 12
so
planets.
as far as history has concerned,
Yeah.
history has determined that there was only one group has determined what astronomy has 12 planets, and that was the Greeks. Thousands of years later.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Which technically people nowadays with astronomy, right? We have the debate also about where and this is all the astronomers, right? That have been around forever. Some of them are the most regarded, well regarded, or whatever, and they still fucking are warring over Pluto being a true planet or not, or even if it's not a true planet, a dwarf planet, which is apparently different than a true planet. And then they'll do war over that because a lot of them will say it's not even a dwarf planet. It's, I can't remember what the heck the thing is now that they're trying to claim or something. It's not a moon. I can't remember what the heck it was, and it's just like, you know, actually, if we actually continue to diverge off of the educational system to science stuff, what I want to say is that it also makes me think of and give the example of evolution, because they do this all the time with evolution. Like, they still can't decide what the fuck a raccoon is. Because, like...
Oh, you're kidding.
What was it? I think it was like 15 years ago or 20 years ago. They were like, we're pretty sure, they weren't sure, they didn't have it categorized, but like, we're pretty sure it's probably a feline. Because they can get feline distemper, and they have a lot of cat-like behaviors, and they love to be around cats for some reason, so they'll raid their food or whatever. So I guess whatever. But then at the same time, it was like another 5 to 10 years later, then they're like, actually, we're gonna officially categorize it as its own species. And then I think it was within the last like 5 years, I saw that a lot of these experts were saying it's like, actually, we're pretty confident it actually belongs to canids, so it's a type of dog or related to dogs. And I'm like, here we fucking go. So like, you can't even decide on that. You can't decide on what the fuck a dinosaur was, if it was feathered, if it wasn't, if they came from birds, if the birds came from them. You can't decide if we came from primates. There's literally all this research is coming out like, oh, actually now they're like, now we actually believe we didn't descend from primates. But at the same time, I've literally heard legitimate experts in the evolutionary field that are like, including anthropology, evolutionary anthropology, they're like, humans, because that's anthropology. Humans are, you know, the ancestors are, or rather they're the evolution of whales, of a branch of whales. We come from whales. I've heard we come from birds, and I've seen we've come from pigs. So porcine. And I'm just like, and I've noticed it's a cycle, because if you look far enough back, it's like they just go through this like cycle or rotation between these things over and over again. And it's like, what? Hello? You know, like, if you're so confident and you always say this is absolute fact and you can't contest evolution, why the fuck can't they agree on anything?
Exactly.
Half the time. They still also, they know for a fact that, an example, gators and crocodiles, at least, if not also others in their family, like caimans and gharials, are dinosaurs. They didn't just come from the Cretaceous, if not further back. They also have been virtually genetically unchanged, which means evolution, they haven't evolved at all. They're the same pretty much as they were before, at their last supposed evolutionary change during the years of the dinosaurs, that they were dinosaurs, because they would have came from things like Caprosuchus and things like that, which were dinosaurs officially. But they won't ever say that they're dinosaurs. They insist that they're not dinosaurs at all. They just happen to come from then, and they're virtually unchanged, which, like, they are literally dinosaurs. But they're like picky about that. And it's super, super dumb and frustrating. And there's so many other examples of that. Like, one of the other evolutionary examples I like to come up with is the supposed proof that evolution is absolute fact and true, because this is an unalienable fact. So it's absolutely, it never changes. This is factually across all of evolution that proves it to be true. Is that with evolution, anytime a species evolves to the point where they have more negative traits, especially a lot more, substantially more negative survival traits than genetically, than they have positive for survival, they are innately going to go extinct every time, and they always have. Except we have koalas, and we still have kiwis, and we still have all these other animals like those where they are almost entirely negative in their survival traits. Because, like an example, koalas are so sleepy, and they sleep more than sloths do, because they move less than sloths, because they are so ran down in their metabolism, such a slow metabolism, because they evolved to only be able to eat a specific type of eucalyptus, and it's a highly toxic eucalyptus that they can only eat. But they've developed this ability to digest it, except they can't naturally digest it unless they eat this poop from their parents. And so then they have to go through that process, but then they eat it, and because it's so toxic, they can technically tolerate it, but they technically aren't, they're not immune to it. So that's why they sleep like 18 to 20 hours a day. And that's why whenever Australia has these big, wildfires, or they call them bushfires, through the eucalyptus forests and everything else, and the ginkgo forests, there's just like, all these people have to try to go in and rescue these sleepy fucking koalas, babies on their backs and stuff, because they're just asleep. They're just narcoleptic because they can't fucking move. And then also, because there's so much minimal water in their eucalyptus, they are also like pretty much perpetually dehydrated. And so like, they're so slow because they have a bunch of like lactic acid and other buildups in their muscles at all times because of the eucalyptus toxin, because that's one of the things it does. And so, and plus it also is like such a high level of metabolism requires that their whole body pretty much has to sleep so that they can metabolize the fucking eucalyptus they eat. So like literally there's no reason for them to still be existing and surviving. So they literally, but guess what? They could directly, clearly prove that that is not actually a universal fact of evolution, and that apparently sometimes, with nothing but negative traits, you somehow still exist. For thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, or even up towards millions of years. Kiwis are also one that has a load of more negative traits than positive traits for survival, and they're still there. Fine. Like, one of the main thing that everyone thinks of is the whole egg to body ratio, because their eggs are literally, I think it takes up like half or like 2/3 of their entire body cavity is their egg. It's just,
Is their egg?
Yes, and then they have to shove that fucker out to lay it. Can you imagine, like, if a human woman had, a uterus that stretched to the size where it was below their knees, like a quarter of the way down the shin, and then up to their clavicle, that's basically a kiwi with a full egg inside of itself. Wow. And there's so much about it that doesn't make any sense. And so like that's why I love harping against evolution a lot, because I'm like, hello? Because this is the stuff that they always flaunt. And they're like, this proves us so accurate and right. They always are arrogantly and staunchly or flamboyantly just like, and that's why evolution is absolutely truth. And yet it's like, I can immediately take that exact set of things that supposedly prove you're consistently factually correct and non-contestable, like, and it's very much legitimate across the board, and immediately use it against itself.
One of the rules for evolution is basically survival of the fittest, is it not?
Well, that's the thing, though. That's one of the things that annoys me about evolution.
Exactly.
Is they always say, oh, it's survival of the fittest. No, that's Darwinism. And Charles Darwin went out not to prove evolution. He went to disprove it and creationism both.
Oh,
he was
man.
actually being very cynical about it. He wanted to prove that he was right, and that it's actually this much more simplistic, and it's basic in terms of environmental factors. Survival of the fittest is the most hyper-simplistic way you could put it, and that is what Darwinism is. And then evolution saw that, and we're like, well, let's cherry-pick things like we're forming a religion back in, the year 10.
The fact is that ultimately, the educational system parrots belief structures and all sorts of stuff that may not necessarily be correct or has flaws in it as well. So, what's your take on that?
I mean, it's obviously true, but it's true across the board because humans are obsessed with being extremists. Okay. They always have to, once they get one extreme, say, if you're going to do the usual oversimplified, illegitimate, left, right, linear spectrum, right? 2D spectrum. They might go extreme left in their education or whatever the heck they teach and their beliefs. And then all of a sudden, because in backlash to that, they rip back the opposite direction and now they want to go far right. And that's like the theological, conservative, Bible thumping, religious school type of shit, which is actually what's kind of happening right now because of all the DEI related, the trans stuff especially, and all that crap that's in schools now, rampant across the US. Now it's starting to rip the other direction, and actually that's probably also why politically around the world a lot of people are starting to go towards the right, much further to the right politically in their voting across the entire world, especially in Europe, than they are going left, because Europe and North America were the two places in the world that were like obsessed with the whole DEI and LGBTQ plus letters, numbers, and symbols people and stuff, and all, especially the trans stuff. And now, because it's finally coming to a head, the proverbial pendulum is going to rip the opposite direction. But that's why you never see anything in the middle, or in a balanced take, or in a balanced policies, including in education, let alone politics or sociology or anything else, because humans are creatures of extremes. They just want it their way, and if it means impulsively ripping the opposite direction and going further than they actually normally would want, just to retaliate, they're going to do that. And the educational system's always done that.
Exactly.
Especially modern day, like probably since I'd say at least the 70s forward. Because obviously, the further back in time you go, the actual origination of the U.S. educational system comes closer into view. And thus it's more still as it was when it was formed, which, by the way, was as a byproduct of the United States Department of Agriculture when it was formed in the 1800s. The U.S. government, along with the Rockefellers, predominantly, along with, I can't remember the other super rich family that was here at the time with them, but they had a hand in working with the government at the time to officially... that was the early 1900s. I think it was the very end of the 1800s, though. They formed the USDA. And in the process of that, the Rockefellers specifically realized there was a monopolistic opportunity on basically psychology and thus education that they could seize with it. And that actually specifically came from when they finished the USDA and its formation with the meat grading system. And if you pay attention to the meat grade system... and then the U.S. school system's grading system, they're identical. And it's not because they're identical because, they're just that similar. They literally, it's the U.S. education system was formed as a byproduct of the USDA.
Interesting.
And so, therefore, that's why we are graded in school all the way through university, the exact same system and grading system and way that they grade meat before they put it up for sale in shrink wrap and styrofoam. So it was actually predatory because they're like, we could, with the formation of the U.S. educational system, we could turn it into a tool to benefit our companies. And so it's really what it is for compliance. They want to create compliant, obedient, good little minions or cogs in the corporate machine. At the time, it was the good little industrial workers that were obedient and compliant to authority. And then from there, of course, as things modernized, not necessarily the greatest thing in the world, it just exchanged one horrible set of conditions for another, go figure, one set of shackles for a different set of shackles. It turned from typical heavy industry to the modern, corporate structure instead. But it's basically can use the exact same system. All they have to do is rebrand and change a few different words and terminologies, and it technically is the same education all over again. So it's never really changed. That's one of the reasons why there's so many people that are trying to push for policy changes and actually to completely overhaul the U.S. educational system right now. From teachers and parents to students and former students,
they want a monopoly.
adults. because the people are sick of it, because it's just like, why the fuck are we wasting our time on this shit?
Exactly.
Going into debt, by the way, if they're stupid enough to buy into, oh, we need higher education, it's just a debt trap. That's why half of what you learned there is just the same shit you already learned at school. They already taught you. It's just to make sure you remember to be compliant. In other words, you don't have critical thinking skills. You're not going to think for yourself. You're just going to do as they taught you to do.
As the, what was it called? As they put it inside of that Pink Floyd song, welcome, my son. Welcome to the machine.
Just like another brick in the wall, right?
Exactly.
And it's funny because the UK obviously has a completely different educational system, but theirs is like just as bad, I would say, because it's the same basic idea and premise of how it was formed, except for them, it was also because of the fucking empire, or not the empire, sorry, the monarchy, because it's when it first formed, and then that's why they still have all this weird, like, dress code and shit. They still do. Where you still have to wear these weird, stupid, semi-formal outfits and shit. And, like, it's just this, that especially drives me insane, because it's like, that's so fucked up and stupid. Like,
It is fun.
and what's even funnier is that the places in the world that are most famous for having school uniforms throughout your years, that are always these specific and literally uniform, right? They're exactly the same colors, same patterns, same, like conscription, right? Is places like China, you know, and all these other places. Like, I think they're under Pol Pot. Cambodia had the fucking same system going. I think some of them still there in that part of Southeast Asia do. And it's just like all these places that have these like negative dictator histories or authoritarian histories, or dictatorships in general, they usually had these very conscripted school uniforms where it was very strict. You can only use the conscripted uniforms that the school allowed you to or gave you.
Exactly.
And so it's like, that's fucked up, which actually ironically does tie back into theology and religions, because most religions, at least Christians, you have to dress this very specific way.
Exactly.
Or you will get reprimanded aggressively, because it apparently shows disdain, disrespect, and contempt for your Lord. And it's just like, and then I could go into the religion topic and rant about that forever, because it's like, then it's like, yeah, because your God is gonna give a fuck about the textiles you're wearing. Like, seriously, as long as you're a good person that believes, or believes at least your interpretation of his supposed word, right? And you follow in his footsteps, and you do your best. He's not going to care if you're butt fucking naked with an erection going to church. I guarantee it. That, whatever. They're not going to give a, whatever the fuck the entity is, it's not going to give a fuck.
I mean, ultimately, the Jewish position is ultimately the priests, they were given a set apart set of garments. And ultimately, the other people through that act were taught to dress their best. However, as far as what their best ultimately is, that's your choice.
Yeah.
I mean, there weren't necessarily a set of laws that governed necessarily how you wore your clothing, essentially, except for, quote unquote, no mixed threads, and that's pretty much it.
What do you mean when you say mixed threads?
Basically, like 50% cotton and 50% wool, essentially. Or
You're saying that was actually required to be uniform? As in, like
a
100%?
100% cotton, 100% wool, 100% this.
That's so weirdly specific.
Well,
That is actually bizarre. That could me repeat what I just said about the uniforms and stuff, or where.
Ultimately, it just, other than that, you had your choice, essentially.
Yeah. What if you showed up to church and you tied your tie on your dick, but that's all you're wearing? What? Leotards in your toes? Like, what?
Well, technically, it's not even a requirement to go to, basically fellowship in that regard.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, it's not even a requirement to go to a fellowship per se. Actually, that was actually an invention later on, or whatever. As far as that is concerned, that's basically how you're supposed to represent yourself in day-to-day life.
Right.
But ultimately, as far as your desire goes for how do you want to present yourself, well, there you go. quite frankly, I think that the whole educational system regarding the clothing and stuff like that, it just it drives me up a wall. Like, for instance, you go to you go to some like Catholic school or whatever. The school uniforms.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's freaky to me.
It is very weird. He's also wearing denim and what is probably polyester, which is a 50-50 mix of textiles. Sacrilegious.
Basically, I was actually in the I too was also in the
Special education.
special education. Yeah, basically
AKA the minibus school. Yay!
exactly. Yay! That whole ordeal, basically, one of the things that drove me up a wall was they put me in second grade and stuff like that. It wasn't necessarily an education system per se.
Right.
I mean, basically, they taught you how to socialize and stuff like that, like social skills and stuff. And that didn't come about till later on, like middle school or something.
Oh, wow. That's delayed.
Yeah. The other than that, we in elementary school, you were inside of one classroom, and it was diverse essentially.
Oh, actually, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
How many kids per, like, on average per class, or per classroom
About
did you have?
10.
You're lucky as fuck. Yeah, see, that, I just wanted to, just for a moment. Well, that immediately was of great interest to me because, a neighbor we used to have in this apartment complex, that is, me and my mom, because we live together here, up above us, on the other side of the breezeway, she went into tutoring and teaching, but she was like teaching these classes of, I think it were like, I think they were like second graders or something like that.
Yeah.
Second and third graders, I think. And what was funny is that she was like so stressed and exhausted. She's like, they don't give us enough resources to be able to teach in these classrooms because there's too many kids. And I asked her, I'm like, how many kids are in your classroom? And she's like, 12. And I literally started cackling. I was just laughing my ass off. And I'm like, you do not begin to fathom or understand how lucky you are, because when I was in school, it averaged 32 kids per a single classroom. 32. Now imagine being somebody like me, who was already auto outcast by everybody by default, especially considering I was the school's favorite kid to bully. So they literally threatened other students, which I didn't find out, by the way, until I was like in late high school, or either I was an early adult. From my mom, she told me that it's like there was a bunch of students that told the principal and my teachers and stuff, like they wanted to be friends with me, but they would actually act like they hated me and they would avoid me because if they didn't, they were threatened that they would also be harshly bullied too. So interesting how that works. But anyway, imagine that aspect to it. And then on top of that, I'm highly attention deficit. I'm very ADHD. I do not learn the way that they require to by the US curriculum, which is that you just simply have to sit down, shut up, focus, lock the fuck in, and just read whatever they're reading, and then fill in every single, problem that they give you on a quiz or on a test or whatever else. Because it's basically just testing. If you haven't noticed, all the tests, what are they really? They're just basically paperwork. Exactly. If you think about it, they're just getting you used to doing paperwork for the whole rest of your life, which is why you do that from like literally fucking second grade forward. Because they want you to be a competent enough, obedient little worker bee for the rest of your life. Set fact aside, imagine the attention deficit. I don't learn that way. I'm outcast by everybody anyway because they don't want to be bullied harshly like I was. Exactly. I got punched in the stomach so many fucking times, real fucking hard, kneed in the stomach super fucking hard, against a stone fucking wall, by the way. And I'm talking like, river stones. Yeah. Because Errol Hassel, which is my elementary school, I don't think that's a fucking risk to say that because it's been so long ago. But Errol Hassel, my elementary school, has the outer walls. They have all these big size river stones that are all different shapes and sizes and cuts and stuff like that, sticking out from like concrete mortar. For some reason, that's the walls. Or the facade. I don't know why. But like, I was always pinned against those rocks of that wall, getting my fucking my stomach kneed and kicked in and punched in, and sometimes my face too, by that bully. And the irony is that I've actually had like 2 teachers, 3 Beaverton School District administrators, and the principal of that school go out there, watch it happen, laugh afterward, and then say, what the fuck do you expect us to do about it? Go to the class. In other words, we don't give a fuck. Shut up, stop complaining, go. It doesn't matter. We can't do anything. Our hands are tied. So then you have that aspect to it. And then on top of that, it turns out that odds are also you're likely autistic. But at the time, they misdiagnose you.
Idiots.
And so then you're also like, your body's fucked up on these medications, these heavy, damaging psychological medications you didn't actually need, it turns out, later on in life. Like, all that together, imagine that, you know, in a classroom of 32 kids.
Wow.
So when you go into a classroom of 10 kids, consider yourself fucking lucky. That doesn't cover my home situation, which is also getting rapidly worse. So,
Well, I mean, ultimately, I mean, I'll be, yeah, the classroom in and of itself, one of the things that they did that drove me up a wall was they kept repeating the same thing. I didn't even get graded, not until freaking middle school, man. No, not me. Not me. Mm-mm. Yeah, I wasn't graded at all, not until middle school. And when it came to the majority of my classes inside of high school, that was something else.
Yeah.
Basically, they graded on a curve, and basically, I was able to get away with pretty much anything without having to learn anything. Yeah.
Which, to me, is astounding, because, like, you know, for me, I was automatically going to be fucked over, because the school district and the curriculum, they're like, in the state, they're like, no, we have to grade you normally. And of course, to be fair, you were in special education at that point. By halfway through first grade, they kicked me out of it, and I was only put back in for like, I think it was like a month actually in fourth grade. That teacher was infamously strict and bad anyway, Miss Gwen. But yeah, like, you know, so I didn't have the same experience as him in that sense, so maybe that's why, because it was in mainstream, even though they technically, my psychiatrist, even though I hated his guts, because I still have trauma from that fucker. Marvin Rosen from My Matters PC, by the way. I will happily name drop that motherfucker. Anyway, I don't even know if that guy's still alive, actually. He was getting up there by the time I got out of it. But when I was 18, because, you know, legality, I had to be forced to go through that until I was 18. So, yay. But anyway, the fuck was I going with that? So, okay, so for me, he knew that I needed to be in special education. My 5th grade teacher especially knew I needed to be. He was advocating for that as much as possible. That's why he spent so much of his free time after hours with me one-on-one when he didn't have to. Like, that, he wasn't getting paid for that or anything. That was just out of the goodness of his heart and wanting the best for me. He worked his ass off. He even literally petitioned to the fucking school district on my behalf multiple times, including to let me go into 6th grade, because they wanted to hold me back because I was so miserably bad at math. In fact, I was incompetent at math by that point, and I was also borderline incompetent with like various mainstream sciences, and that's enough to absolutely fuck you over. So they were going to hold me back, and they were hell-bent on it, but he somehow, with his petitioning, actually got me to put through. But they still kept me in mainstream, which was especially stupid, because it's like, he knew that whole year that I needed to be in it. My psychiatrist knew it. They, you know, my parents knew it. They tried their best to advocate for it, and the school district kept rejecting it, saying, no, absolutely not. And I can't even remember what the heck the supposed claims that they made were of why that was a bad idea. But, like, I was about to be held back, you know? I just think about, like, the difference between you and I in that way is very interesting, because you and I are so fucking similar. But also, it does make me curious if I was still in special education at that point, would I have had the same kind of thing that he did? Which, honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I think is kind of stupid in itself, the way that they did that with him as well. Because, like, if you're truly supposed to learn shit, why are you just letting people just like give them passing grades for everything just autopiloted, no matter how badly they actually do? Like, because the whole point of special education technically is you're supposed to fucking get like special teachers and tutors and classes that are meant to like work with the brain function, the cognitive function, and how you process information with that individual student.
Yeah.
But and give them the tools to be able to figure out how to function in the normal world, right?
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder, though, because we're not that far apart in age, really. It makes me wonder, like, how different would it have been any different if I was during my time, if I was in special ed still, or would it have been different because that was the tween period between the modern day where everything is that way anyway, where they're even more so than what you experience, right? And that's in the mainstream. They'll like just write off everything.
Yeah, when it came down to the cognitive aspect that you pointed out there,
Yeah.
actually the fact is most of that stuff I actually learned myself.
Yeah, no, same here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just life experience because you only have yourself at that point. Because
Exactly.
I don't know about your experience, but me, I literally had no adults that I could rely on.
Literally Zippo.
No support. So like I just had to. That's why I mentioned at the beginning, right? And my experience, it didn't matter who I talked to, and self-advocate for myself, right? I constantly was doing that all the time. And I got more emphatic and more determined and more louder and more consistent. I did that the more time passed on because I was just getting overwhelmed and just burnt out. I'm just like, and literally to the point where it's what would be equivalent to an autistic meltdown, which I literally had in the middle of the fucking school lobby in 6th grade in the middle of a school day.
Wow.
During classes. I just fucking lost it and had a meltdown. And that's when somehow they finally decided to listen to me and give me a chance and homeschool me after that. But like, which I excelled after that compared to how I ever did in mainstream, normal public school. But like, like I didn't have any of the support that I needed. I didn't have any of the advocacy from adults around me or anything. So I was just stuck alone. Really, in every way, including friendship-wise. I just didn't have peers that ever would talk to me or really hang out with me. So I was just fucked pretty much from the beginning. But that led me to be able to just say, fuck it. If I'm gonna self-advocate for myself and it goes nowhere, I'm gonna fucking try to teach myself shit. And
that's literally the same thing that I had.
Yeah, and that's when I realized life experience, and especially the biggest, most useful teacher and profound teacher you'll ever have in life is observation.
Exactly.
Just observe from afar everything, and you will pick up on so many fucking details that people miss all the time.
Oh yeah, that is so true.
So material about things are structured, which is I just pushed a button. I don't know what that. I forgot these buttons exist. I don't know what those do. Hopefully that didn't fuck anything up. I could check. I'm not going to. It's a bad idea. Anyway, production quality, baby. Yes, I'm a great producer. I don't verify I didn't fuck something up. Let's go. Yes. But yeah, so like that's also fucked up too. But like it's one of those things where it's like I think about that, especially as an adult now. I think about it from a very hyper empathetic standpoint, looking at any other kids who have had to go through the same shit as I did. Because obviously, I wouldn't have to like met somebody like you to know if I went through it, other kids are going through the same exact bullshit too.
Dude, that is
and so
true.
There's endless kids that are getting completely fucked over, and to an extent, it actually can be detrimental to your development, like especially in terms of like being able to socialize, being able to trust yourself. Self-confidence, everything, because especially when you don't have the adults that have any emotional capacity really to be there for you or to educate you or to help you or to guide you or to support you,
force that
right,
to have that
or to advocate for you or whatever. Yeah, you're damned and you're just adrift alone in this abyss of water, and you're just like you're sitting on top of the water, like you're on a leaf or something, but you're just like, I don't know where the fuck I am. This is fucking hopeless, But so that's why either you go one direction, which is usually very dark and disturbing, where eventually people either just give up or they willingly allow themselves to become and enter into like relationships with people who are highly manipulative and abusive, or the other way around, or they commit suicide or something similar to that. So they'll off themselves, or there'll be like somebody like you or me where we're like, it just almost pisses us off to the extent we're like, fine, fuck it. If I'm the only one in this world who I can rely on to do what I need to do, or to help me out, or to educate myself, or to learn, or to function, then fuck it, I'll do it for myself, you know?
Exactly.
So you either lose any self-confidence and trust and belief, or you gain a load more, and then people a lot of times will misconstrue it as being arrogant as fuck. And you're not being arrogant, it's just, this is, you know, this is your way to almost repair yourself, and then prepare yourself, and then actually carry yourself in a way where it's like, at least I know I can trust myself at all times, and I don't have to worry about anybody else, you know? And yeah, it comes off as extremely cocky or overly self-confident or arrogant, but it's like,
oh, dude, I
but
get
that's
that crap all the time.
but see, that proves that they fundamentally misunderstand where it comes from or what it really is.
Exactly.
You know, which is actually interesting because I saw somebody mention that recently, that most people, especially in the US, gravely misunderstand self-confidence and conflate it for egotism or arrogance.
Dude, that is so
And it's
true.
like there's a big difference between being extremely self-confident, or even just generally self-confident, and caring for yourself in a way where you put yourself first, than it is arrogance or egotism, where people are just self-righteous. There's a difference between that, but it's apparently such a fine line that people just conflate it because they're so too easily confused.
My rabbi, I actually discussed the same thing with him, and basically there's a certain point where people like him and me, we've gotten to the point where we can actually understand biblical Hebrew to the point where you can just look at it, understand what it's meaning, and that's it.
Yeah.
And basically, we gave an analogy. You don't go to a car mechanic and argue with the mechanic. You just don't do it. I mean, ultimately, the fact that the same analogy proves true between you and me there, man.
Yeah.
I mean, when you've looked at the same thing over and over and over and over there, man.
Yeah. Clearly, even when we were kids in school, we were highly perceptive to the reality of the school system, what they were trying to teach, how useless the bulk of that information is.
Yes.
Which could bring us to the next topic, which is one of the big pieces that I love to always talk about in detail and emphasize when it comes down to the U.S. education system and why it's complete shit. But first, we're going to go to a commercial break, and that commercial break is called I Gotta Go Pee.
And I gotta get water.
Okay, and we're back. Probably my personal favorite part of it, because it's like the most, I guess, useful criticism part of it, because it also gives it's the part where you start to suggest like how to fix it, or at least how to make it make sense for once.
Yeah.
To where it actually educates people. It actually helps us for once. Because, as I aforementioned, right, and I think you did too, alluded to at least, that the bulk of what they teach in the U.S. educational system through all grades is completely fucking useless. Like, the example I love to give is that, like, people love to argue that actually, no, it's all useful. Like, learning how to, to do advanced mathematics, it allows you and sets you up to be able to do, like, accounting and banking or architecture or, whatever else like that, right? Fair point. The problem is that I can now immediately weaponize that point you just made and say that's exactly why it's irrelevant, because this is normal general education, right? It's the normal school for a grade school, right? For anybody who's just likely going to try to enter the workforce, and of course they're still going to try to get an entry level job, including even if they do go to university, college, whatever you want to call it, or not. They're still going to, especially if they do that, they're definitely going to get a job. But either way, they're going to get a job. So that's entry level. So it's still technically not useful. It only becomes useful if it's an elective once it gets past a certain point, whether that is math or science or chemistry or biology or whatever else, literally any other topic. There's only to an extent does it really matter to teach that to anybody when they're kids growing up, because eventually it hits a point where now it's becoming excessive, because their brain's not going to retain it, because brains don't retain information like that if it's not used. If it goes unused for too long, you forget. This is why most people in the US are incompetent with geography to where half the time they don't even know their own backyard literally and how to navigate without using a GPS, which is especially egregious, and I hate that. But then I'm very biased because I'm extremely into geography. So, but anyway, it's a very basic, simple thing. I don't understand why it's so confusing for people, but nevertheless, anyway, but an example, that's why people forget that. Or again, most people in the US especially forget a lot of the more advanced math because they're never going to use it. Even if they get a courtesy clerk job at a grocery store, especially modern day where it's already digitally done now, where it tells you how much to give and change or whatever, it's no longer, it's even less necessary to give that math now because it's already done for them. Right? But even if you want to do it just in case like a power outage happens, now they still have to do that. At the very least, it's still basic math. You're not teaching fucking pre-algebra to fucking do a courtesy clerk job, obviously, right? So that's why all the topics they teach in school need to be to a certain point. It just teach the basics and maybe the advanced basics and leave it at that. And then everything else becomes an elective. So now
That's a valid point.
Nobody else for the rest of their childhoods, which obviously includes teen years, are in school until they decide to take an elective. Say some kid is really fucking interested in becoming an architect or a carpenter or becoming this big financial, person, what do you call it? Like a fiduciary or something. Exactly. Then at that point, they can take their electives in advanced mathematics. Exactly. Congratulations. And it's that easy, right? And then what you replace, and that's just an example to keep it simple without going into every other fucking topic, because the same goes for each of those. If you have something along the lines of like, because see, in those blank years where they're not necessarily having to go to school because they've completed the advanced basics, advanced basics, they obviously don't need anything more. They're free. They can spend the rest of their childhood as childhood should, which is being free, being able to be kids, learn things on their own, go and fall and rip their knee open or break their toe or nearly fucking drown because they thought it would be clever to hide underneath a pool floaty or something and hide and seek match, or all the different things that get diseases because you played in the mud and then you didn't think to wash your hands because you're still having too much fucking fun with your best friends or whatever, or your neighbor in your neighborhood. Like all the things that kids are supposed to do. And then obviously as you get to teen years, it becomes even more, you become more inquisitive, especially about more important things, just naturally. Especially if the parents did the right thing and they were actually good, helpful parents. They aren't overbearing, but also not the ones that just don't care and are aloof or apathetic to doing their jobs. It's still technically semi-elective, I guess is what it would be. So this is why I said that. But basically, you now have other classes that would replace the things of beyond advanced basics. An example, you would give people basic survivalism classes, urban and obviously wild, because those are always useful, incredibly helpful, necessary skills. Yeah. Because you never know when shit hits the fan. You never know when the whole power infrastructure goes down. You never know when a war breaks out. You never know when you might end up homeless or whatever else, or you might end up lost when you went camping and you somehow got completely turned around and lost, and now you're stuck out in the wilderness somewhere. Even if it's rare, it's still one of the most incredibly powerful skills you can have. Another example is basic carpentry. Basic home ec, at least, if not advanced home ec. Although advanced home ec, again, anything advanced, I think, even these things should be elective. They shouldn't be required, right? So everything else gets replaced with these basic skills, the basic levels of those classes. So basic mechanics, basic finance. That includes, obviously, it includes tax classes, it includes classes on mortgages, it includes classes on loans, on renting, on obviously subscriptions, on everything else to balance your budget and to actually know really what you're doing, how to save, right? All these basic things that are desperately needed. At the very least, teach the taxes and the mortgage stuff, and the basic budgeting stuff, because that's such an imperative thing that everyone literally requires, especially in the modern world. Gardening. I think actually gardening is a huge basic skill that should be taught by default, because
absolutely
people, and in fact, especially if they have good teachers, because this is the key to a good teacher, is that they're not overly, like a parent actually, they're not overly strict and like strong-fisted, but they're also not, or short fused, right? Or timered, but they're also not too laid back and aloof and like, meh, I don't really give a fuck. They have to be in that balanced spot where they have good qualities of both extremes to balance themselves out. That's the best kind of parent. That's the best kind of teacher. Another key point to a good teacher and parent, but especially a teacher at that point, is that they have to be able to understand how to make a class entertaining. Because in order to be engaging and thus be remembered, and actually people learn it not just willingly, but their brains want to learn it and be like, I like this. And so in other words, that's called engagement. It's engaging and focusing on the topic, whatever the heck the class is about. That's the only happens with entertainment. Exactly. It has to be made entertaining in order to be engaging, and then that's the only way. If it has to be engaging in order to be retained.
Exactly.
And actually learned. And actually have the best graduation rates, so to speak, and everything else. Because it wasn't like, oh, this was forced or a fabricated number, or like we had to do all these makeup classes because, you know, kids just didn't care. It's because they literally fucking did what they're supposed to as a good educator, and that's make it engaging and involved and fun. So that, especially if it involves equally hands-on, if not make it fully hands-on, so that way literally they get the hands-on lived experience as well of learning these things. And especially with those other topics that you'd replace the advanced stuff beyond the advanced basics with those home ec and the gardening or the mechanics of the, you know, whatever, all the different things, right? These necessary skills. That's the best ones to have fully hands-on as well.
Actually, that worldview makes perfect sense. Actually, even more so, the whole thing about what I pointed out with what was it called? When we derailed the topics.
We Buster Keaton the train off the rail into the canyon.
No.
The train's on fire, everyone's dead.
Yeah, really.
This will happen every episode, I promise.
Absolutely.
And that's not because we try to, it's because it's inevitable.
Yes, exactly. It's inevitable. This is our characters.
Yep.
Our
brains.
Exactly.
Sober.
Exactly.
Actually, no, we're not dropped in our heads as children.
Yeah, we were drop kicked on our heads.
We were used for punting practice from 40 yards.
But when we were talking about punting. Yeah, when we derailed topics, basically the reasoning why I brought up what was it called? Whole theories in that regard, and why I brought it up in the first place is because of the fact I wanted to make a point. The point being that in the educational system, it's basically taught as fact in that regard. I believe legitimately that should be abandoned in some cases, essentially, because ultimately, like in, well, let's say history, or rather science in that regard, there's certain worldviews which each of them can actually be where science can actually be given another interpretation, i.e. quantum science, or heck, even history in that regard. I mean, all we have basically in regards to biblical history is, well, basically theory. We should encourage children to come up with their own theories.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, but that's universally across the board.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's part of also becoming your own person.
Exactly.
That's especially true for parenting, though. Like,
yes.
That's one of the most infuriating things about parenting, especially modern day, and also like the 80s and back, is that parents are so famous for never letting their kids fucking think for themselves or do things and screw up on their own or whatever. You know?
Exactly.
And then, because the best way to parent is to, especially, like I said, it's that balance, right? So what you do is you allow them to go out on their own, especially once they get like old enough, like they're, you know, I'd say like 8 to 12. If you're in a relatively safe neighborhood or whatever, you know, a cul-de-sac or wherever else, you can let them go out and play outside. Obviously, you're still going to check in on them every so often. You're still going to keep a relatively close eye on them, but you're going to be at a distance. Maybe you're in the house or whatever. You're just going to make sure that they're obviously safe.
Exactly.
Because that's also important. You're just not being a helicopter parent where you're like, I'm going to police you. I'm going to stare at you like I'm a surveillance camera. And I'm never going to let my eyes off of you because I control issues is my middle name. Anyway, but yeah, there's too many parents like that out there too. But, you know, so you have an example of that. And then once they get like 12 and older, then you let them literally go out with their friends or to their friends' places. Or you go let them go out on the, you know, walk to a restaurant if they want to go there or arcade nearby or something. You let them do what they, you know, ride their bike somewhere. You let them be on their own fully. You don't have to literally just always have an eye on them. And then that way, you know, obviously you probably have a plan of like if you feel uncomfortable at any point or if like you get too tired or if like something feels off, whether it's like you feel like somebody's following you or like something just doesn't feel right, you know, we know our area. So if you're on like a bike ride or something, you're going for a walk and you see anything like that happens, obviously you go to this location and you immediately text us. You can text us a letter. We'll agree on the letter, you know, so it's literally instant text. And then that way we know, okay, we're going to go to that location. We're going to pick you up because obviously something's not right. Like, obviously you have that fail safe in there to make sure that they're okay. But at the same time, it still shows that kid that you trust your kid to be on their own. You trust them to take care of themselves, potentially protect themselves if need be, God forbid. But like, they'll be okay. And you know that they'll be, you know, they can trust you to trust them and vice versa.
Exactly.
And that's the best thing that a parent can do, especially once you get to like 12 and up, because that then also encourages them naturally, which is a very natural process biologically in any teenager, is that once they get to like 12 and up, they're going to have all those like much more serious, important talks and questions that they want. It's going to be uncomfortable and awkward, but as a parent, right, you got to be willing to talk about it. And like, but you also would expect them by that point because that's natural. That's usually when it comes up on their own, whether somebody around them or their peers mentioned it, a teacher mentioned something, they read it, they saw an article or a headline or read something in a book, whatever the hell it might be, saw a movie, you know, now they're curious about something. You let them, in other words, the point is that at that point, you're letting them come to you to ask you a question. And then at that point, you're not telling them your belief or your viewpoint on it necessarily, but rather, or how you feel about it. But you're saying, like, you're going to say, try to remove your bias and just tell them in an educational sense exactly what the right answers in terms of education, right? Like, that's the best thing you can do because that's the middle ground. And then again, that once again shows that you trust your kid and they can now trust you fully. Exactly. So they're also therefore be much more likely to actually be willing to tell you certain things that normally kids might keep, especially teenagers might keep as a secret because they know they can trust you, you know, and you could help them with something or whatever. And that's a huge thing because obviously if you go too much of a tyrant, so too much of a helicopter parent, too careful or too strict or too watchdog-like, you know, controlling, the issue too protective, then the issue becomes the fact that now that kid's going to be more likely to rebel. They're not going to trust themselves. They're certainly not going to trust you with anything because they've proven you can't be trusted, and therefore they no longer have the security to trust themselves really because you don't trust them, obviously, or else you wouldn't parent like that. So that creates potentially a trauma as well in their head because now they're a more insecure person because how did they trust themselves if you couldn't trust them because you never trusted them, right? Exactly. And then so they're never going to come to you with anything. And then that potentially endangers them more or whatever, you know, makes them more insecure, makes them less capable of a person long term going into adulthood, which creates more problems, especially in relationships or whatever else, God forbid. Yeah. But then if you're the opposite way around and you're way too aloof and removed and you just don't really care, you're one of those way too excessively laid back parents, like, do whatever the fuck you want whenever you want. I don't give a fuck. And you're just never there, you know, and or you're just literally never there. And you just, a lot of parents, you know, like I grew up with a kid. Well, some of the years I grew up, there was a kid on Sugar Plum, so next street over, that was named Lane, and he was Jewish, but he was ethnically and religiously Jewish. His family was, but I think his mom was in prison and his dad was in and out of prison. But his dad also made a lot of money, but he lived in his grandma's house, and his grandma's health, of course, was deteriorating pretty quickly. But he was also there home alone a lot of the time because grandma also worked. And, this is a true kid. Like, he's elementary school kid. So he's still single digits into early preteens. And his dad was never there as a result. His mom was never there because she was in prison the whole time. He was never there because he was either in prison or when he was out of prison, he was just always doing whatever the fuck he did to get money.
Yeah.
And so his dad would just like occasionally just buy him all these lavish gifts. But he wouldn't bring them to him personally. He had them shipped to the house that he lived in with his grandma, who was alone by himself most of the time because grandma usually wasn't there. And if she was usually asleep or whatever. So all he had to show for love from his parents was these stupidly lavish gifts. Like, he had a go-kart. He had, what's irony is that this is a low-income neighborhood that we grew up in Aloha. So that was like unheard of. So he was like, it was notable because you noticed him, as if you didn't before, like I did before. But if you noticed him, usually it was because it was after he got like the go-kart and he'd be zipping it around, a few blocks in the area or whatever else. And like, that's another way that you can be the opposite kind of a parent, where you're too aloof and removed. And then that also creates the same thing that the overly strict one does, except arguably a lot of times more severe, where you don't trust yourself. You're way more insecure of a person because you also never truly had the love from your parents or the support or the care. And you literally had to grow up when you're like 5 to care for yourself.
Exactly.
And then that potentially makes you delinquent and everything else, which he did get into trouble off and on with the police, because he did get into delinquency every so often, understandably, because he's a fucked up kid because he just didn't have his parents around. And I always felt bad for him. But like, as an example, that's another kind of parent. That's also why that's bad parenting. And so it is related to the educational system because of like what he said, including the religious aspect that you could relate it to. It's especially true for parents because arguably, actually, your most important teacher is going to be your parent. Just like what should be your best friend, at least growing up, should always be your parents.
That's actually my belief. Your best teacher is going to be your parent.
They should be.
Yes.
Most parents are not good teachers.
True.
That's the problem. And you and I both know that from a certain standpoint, and I'm sure plenty of other people out there do too.
But yeah, ultimately the whole ordeal though regarding this what was it called? Even more so when it comes to the educational system and stuff like that. It's it is ultimately a sort of a catch-22. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are some things that which do require facts, like when you're making bread and stuff like that. Yeah, you need this right amount of sugar. You need this right amount of flour.
You need to wait this amount of time without disturbance for the dough to rise.
Exactly. I mean, that's just practical application there. Yeah. I mean, if you don't have that, well, then I'm sorry, but your bread is going to be a jumbled mess, and it's just going
it's going to turn into a fucking blimp.
Exactly. Yeah. Other than that, I mean, when it comes to other things though, like history and science, I mean, obviously there are different worldviews though.
Big time. Yeah.
Big time. Math, maybe.
Math does have theorems, so yeah, I suppose true in a way. Plus, again, I guess in regards to like how you learn it, because you can learn applied mathematics. Well, I guess I could call it that. Practical math, where you're not necessarily doing equations or thinking or seeing numbers or talking about numbers at all. You just apply the math, right? Yeah. Whereas you also have the in-school math, which therefore technically by default becomes impractical math, ironically, which is the written math form, I guess. So it's the equations, the numbers, and everything. So because you have those two different things, I guess, again, you could argue that's kind of like having a different theory.
Yeah.
Or a different form of math you're learning. Because one's actually much more practical because you can put it into actual function versus you're writing it down on a piece of paper, or you can do it in your head as if you're doing it on paper, but instead it's in your head and you're probably picturing a piece of paper, unless you're somebody with aphantasia, which I dread the idea of being having. Yeah, I feel bad for people who have aphantasia, man. Because it's actually funny, too, because you'd think it would be like a genetic thing, and they speculate it is, but I know it's not. And you know why? because my sister, Erica, has aphantasia. She always has. I am exactly the fucking polar opposite. I'm like Nikola Tesla. Everything I think, like while I'm actively thinking, even if I'm talking, I'm literally a lot of times. I think that's why I also don't like. I'm terrible, especially when I'm more impassioned about talking about things. I'm not looking at anybody in the face or the eyes or a camera in that case, because my eyes are kind of wandering around. And literally, it's actually, if you think about it, you might be able to trace what I'm looking at, because it's literally I'm projecting what I'm thinking about into the actual physical world in front of me.
That's actually
like
literally
Tesla.
what I do.
Yeah, exactly like Nikola Tesla. So I'm literally the exact opposite of my sister, which proves it can't really be genetics, because how the fuck does one sibling, whole sibling, end up the opposite of the other one?
Well, no kidding.
You know, we are 3 years apart, but I mean, still, it's the same parent. Both of us are the same parent. Both same parents. I don't know how to word that for some reason. My brain is faulting. Anyway, I'm normally much more grammatically apt, but for some reason my brain is absolutely saying fuck that phrase. You're not gonna get that right.
Yeah,
You're not gonna think about it. I revoke your rights.
I revoke your right to say it right.
Oh man. But one thing I actually thought of when you were talking about when you took home ec, right?
Yeah.
Is that even if I was all the way through high school and mainstream, I wouldn't have been able to take home ec. You know why? It was, well, it didn't exist for most of the time I was in school. In fact, actually, I think they only brought back home ec for like 2 years in Beaverton School District, along with basic mechanics and carpentry.
Are you kidding?
For like 2 years after I was out of school, I would have been graduated. So they hadn't had it for like decades. But what they did, which again, me and him are only like separated by a decade. I think our ages are 9 years apart, right?
I'm 40 years old.
8 years. We're 8 years apart. So that means that he would have graduated in 2004. I would have graduated in 2012. So see, that's what I meant earlier when I mentioned the difference between us, is that I wonder if that time period was somehow different, or my time period in school was different, and the change happened during that portion of time. I don't know, but that means that there's already a difference there, because he did have home ec. Yeah. It's the same school district, but by the time I was in school, they hadn't had home ec for a few years. And they had removed it. They claimed it was too expensive, those extra classes that are actually useful, like home ec, like mechanics, like carpentry. Horticulture is what I mean, technically. Horticulture, but including gardening. Yeah. Those all were removed by the Beaverton School District, and claimed it's way too expensive to do. So here's the thing, though. They re-implemented it for 2 years. But what they did is they did what a lot of other school districts in this nation have done over the last like 2 decades. And that is they made it to where you had to get, I think it's B's or B pluses in every single topic in school. At least. And some of them actually, you had to be a fucking honor roll valedictorian in order to even be allowed to choose to enter them. But and Beaverton School District did, I think it was the B, all B's or all B pluses is what you had to have, and you had to have a lot of money because they charged you just to enter the classes at all. If you wanted to take them,
are you kidding?
They were electives. If you wanted to take them, they charged you. I think it was like, depending on what it was, the topic and how far you want to go into it. I think it was like between $400 and $1,200.
What the?
So like you had to be pretty rich, or your family did, and you also fucking had to almost be an honor roll valedictorian.
What the?
Otherwise, you had no ability. They would not allow you to elect to take those classes, it's a very commonplace in the U.S. now, and has been for about 20 years. Is that like they want to charge you a lot of money, and they also want to make sure you're like borderline valedictorian honor roll, or literally only on that, and that's the only ones who can take it.
No sense.
Yeah, and it's fucked up. It's I think there's nothing okay or defensible about that policy. It's royally screwed up. And so
it's fucked up.
In that vein, I think that if it comes back, again, I hope it's the way I said it was, which is it replaces all the excess beyond, advanced basics of all the topics they teach. If they made them come back as electives, I want it to be like a federal mandate in the US to where it can't be changed ever again, to where it's like it has to be free and anyone can elect to take it.
Yeah.
Especially considering, in my experience, and I know a lot of other people out there like this. We're still a minority, but there's a lot of other people like this. Is that the more you are impassioned or love a topic, the more you excel at it, and the more you actually do. Well, yeah, the more you excel at it, so the better you do by a long shot. And that's especially true in the educational system. Like for me, that was true with that 6th grade thing that my 5th grade teacher petitioned them to allow me to do instead of holding me back, and it was going to this special school, nature school in Five Oaks called Rachel Carson. And it was the nature school was on top of and in tandem with the normal curriculum. So it was your normal school, and then on top of that, you also have the nature school. I instantly was way above my grade average, and I was by far the best student they had, and I just excelled like a motherfucker at everything the nature school, which I knew I would. And I felt so safe, I felt so comfortable, I felt so happy and like energized. I was in my fucking element. And then the moment that you had to go back to the normal school, and I was immediately the exact opposite. I was the most stressed, overwhelmed,
withdrawn,
irritated person I could have been, because I'm just like, I don't know what the fuck to do because I can't do shit. And it was especially when I got into the math class each day. I'm like, what the fuck do you expect me to do? You know, because for context, with math, with the impractical math, so the math they teach in school, the equations, the numbers, the tests, all that, my brain is incompetent. Literally, it is incapable of comprehension of that kind of math. It never has been able to comprehend it, to where literally when I describe it to people, including teachers, psychiatrists, therapists, generally other people, I always describe it the same way, because it's literally the only apt description I can give that's accurate in human terms. Which sounds extreme, but it's true. There's no words that exist except for this to describe it, and that is that they're like alien hieroglyphs to me. As soon as I see it, I'm looking at alien hieroglyphs, and I don't know what the fuck I'm looking at. And therefore, I literally cannot even fathom a question that I'm asked, of like what, which is the instructions of what you're supposed to do with it. How the fuck do you expect me to do shit with this if it's literally alien hieroglyphs? I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to do, you know? I literally, nearly stroke out with how stressed I get immediately when I am faced with those fucking equations. Yeah, it fucking sucks. Actually, on that topic, interestingly, which I haven't told you before, and I don't think I've said to anybody, I haven't on any videos yet. Again, I've done content creation as the criminal violin on YouTube for 11 years. Anyway, it's kind of a big deal. It's a lie. So this is actually the first place I'm doing this. I'm announcing it, and most people might be like, "Why the fuck are you announcing that's irrelevant to me?" It's actually not, because it's very topical, especially with what I just expressed of the math. Right? Is that I actually am very likely to, within the next 2 to 3 months, because they have a backlog, finally, after 5+ years of trying relentlessly, gonna get my autism assessment. So my full autism test. And my therapist who is the new one I have.
Yeah.
Who is extremely, his whole experience is with autism and other neurodivergence. So he's been telling me relentlessly since my first appointment with him, after switching to him, because my original therapist I had for 2 years, she in the company that they are both with, or she was with and he's with, decided to part ways. And I don't know what the reason for it was. It was unexpected. It sprung up on me, so that was kind of stressful. But through these first appointments with this new therapist of mine who has this experience with autism, he laughs sometimes, and he'll tell me, he's like, "Yeah, no, that's 100% autism." He tells me, he's like, I can't legally say that you have autism, because I don't have the qualifications to diagnose you with it, but I guarantee you're gonna test positive for autism. You're gonna be diagnosed with autism. So and it's actually very vindicating, obviously, and validating to hear that. But knowing I'm gonna get that test, he told me that, he said, for some reason, this comprehensive psychological evaluation test that they do, that tests mainly cognitive brain function and how you process information, obviously is the predominant thing and everything. He told me that it includes a intelligence quotient test, so the IQ test, for some reason. And actually, what's funny is I asked him, I'm like, so wait, but what does that have to do with anything? with autism, and he said is like I can't remember what exactly he said, but he said something along the lines that it would indirectly indicate that it's useless. It's just like random thing they just tag onto it for no reason. And so I told him, and I'm like, so what you're saying is that it's basically just a useless tag on. That is literally what you're saying. It's just it doesn't have any actual real use. It's just formality. They just said, fuck it. Well, we can do it, so we're gonna do it. We're just gonna tack it on. And it won't have any purpose or point, but fuck it, we'll do it. And he said, yeah, that's exactly pretty much what it is. But he told me that, of course, there's certain circumstances where it's actually going to be especially useful for autism tests, and it will tell them a lot more as well, which is especially the math aspect. So he says he wants me to make sure I emphasize, he's doing it on my behalf as well to them, but he wants me to emphasize to them that I would like either directly say I would like to have the IQ test as well, or explain to them how the math stuff works for me.
Okay.
Because then at that point they're going to be like, okay, yeah, we're definitely going to be doing the IQ test too. But I just found that to be really interesting because I never heard of that and I didn't know that. And also he described it to me initially as an IQ test, not the psychological test. And then he finally told me what the whole psychological test name was. It was still pretty simple. It was like a comprehensive cognitive psychological evaluation or something like that. I think is its full name is. But you know, I didn't know that was a thing. Even with all the stuff I've been doing research with autism, I didn't know that was a thing that was included in it. But it's really interesting to see that. So I'm going to be stressing my fucking ass off with the acute test. My brain's going to fucking go and have an aneurysm.
You're going to go nuts.
But he told me it's like it usually takes 2 hours, sometimes 3 max. But then on their website, it says it takes an average of 3 to 4 hours to complete the exam and the test. So I'm not talking about just the IQ, I'm talking about the whole thing.
I wouldn't be surprised if
so for me, it's probably going to take...
recognition.
Oh, it does. That's a huge part of it, apparently. But like, for me, and I told him this too, I'm like, God damn, that probably means it's going to take me like 5 to 6 hours, you know? Well, actually, I didn't tell him that because I didn't tell him I saw that on the website. 3 to 4 hours. But I did tell him when he told me 2 hours, I'm like, well, it's gonna probably take me 3 to 4 then. Because like I take forever. And then I gave an example of like when somebody else at the same clinic had me do the RADS-R test, which is the thing that tests to see how needed an autism spectrum test is going to be for somebody, right? It tells you just how likely you are to have autism, and I scored really fucking high on it. I scored a 141 on it, which is extremely high. And so they're like, yeah, basically you're all but inevitably probably autistic, you know, like, well, thanks for the validation. And then now this guy's saying the same thing, you know. I'm actually happy about it. I'm actually excited to get a diagnosis because like most people see it as a negative thing, normal people, quote unquote. But it's actually kind of a benefit and a boon, especially long term with like family members and certain other people, potentially jobs, if I ever get one, because then they can, and likely some of them might be required by law to accommodate, you know, if it's a job, say. But my family, they might better be able to, whether they consciously do it or not, adapt, you know, to how they interact with me, I guess, in a way, right? So then that's a huge boon and benefit too. Have a
professional diagnosis then.
Yeah, like, because it's actually funny because my new therapist actually originally, when I was explaining how my brother works, Mario, which you know about, but he's very cliché-ly human, so he's obsessed with only physical material everything, evidence, proof, everything else. Everything is complete impossibility or bullshit and quackery and far-right conspiracy and all this other stuff, unless there's the physical material like proof. But of course, in standard modern mindset, it also means he has to approve of it in his head that his sources agree with it. In other words, or else it's quackery. So everyone else.
And you know me, man. Yes. I'm the exact same way. But then again,
yeah. But the thing is that I know you're different than him by a long shot too, because you're more open-minded than he is. He's very locked down with that mentality. Whereas you're a lot more up. You're still pretty stubborn in a lot of things.
Exactly.
But comparatively, you're way more open-minded than he is, and because you think about things similar to how I do, and you you kind of almost process situations and information the same way as I do. It's
Exactly.
it makes it actually,
Well,
I guess, more understandable, and like I actually appreciate it more. Even
well,
though normally it would drive me fucking insane, because you know how I am, is that I'm often very existential. So
yes.
I'm like I
Well,
can just be just as material as it can be existential, but for me I don't need material
well,
or physical proof or evidence of anything.
well,
I just need to observe and experience certain things, and then I'm like, okay,
well.
well then
I
I
mean,
believe that.
ultimately, I mean, the fact is, dude. Okay. I mean, I live in the real world here,
Yeah.
man. I mean, what was it called? Here's a here's one basis to take into consideration. One of the things that I like to say to people is show me the data. I also know that statistics can
Yeah.
also be fooled.
Heavily manipulated or fabricated. Yeah.
I mean, for crying out
Yeah.
loud, well, let's take one study into consideration, or no, not a study into consideration, but rather a worldview of someone who gets becomes guilty
Yeah.
because all the evidence shows up that he was quote unquote guilty.
Yes.
What wasn't shown inside of the evidence per se was basically he was threatened or whatever on
Yeah.
camera
Or
because of
yeah.
these certain geographic location. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Or like the U.S. and CIA especially love to do. Like with the Boeing, the most recent thing I would say is the Boeing stuff.
Yeah.
Because remember how many fucking people just conveniently went and oh, they died like a day or two
Yeah,
before
they
they were supposed,
vanished.
day or two before they were about to go onto the national stage in the Supreme Court, I think it was, or
Exactly.
whatever, to testify about the fraud and the dangers that Boeing Corporation
Yeah,
actually poses, and all the the
yeah,
fraud and
come
everything
on.
they're doing,
That's absurd.
the crimes they're committing, and it's like every single time, conveniently, like day before, it was on average, is like the day before.
Yeah.
There's I think four. I don't think there's three. I think there's four of them actually. Went and they conveniently dropped dead, like the day to like
Conveniently.
2 or 3 days before it had they went up there, and that's where actually the meme and the joke came from of blank is not suicidal. That's actually where it be. At least that's where it got popularized, because one of the, I think it was the last person who conveniently showed up dead. They claimed it was suicide. But his family and his closest friends, including some colleagues at Boeing, were like, no, he was not. He was actually extremely motivated and very excited and confident to go up and give all the factual proof and the evidence and the data and the statistics and the files and the records from Boeing and his work with them of their fraud and of their crimes they've committed and everything. And he was literally preparing to do that. Actually, no, I don't think it was the last one. I think it was the one. I was thinking it was the one in the middle. I think it was like the second or third guy, because he was. I think he was the same one who went and he conveniently had a bullet hole in his head. He was found in this car, and I think it was the same day as the trial. And it was like he was literally getting in the car too, about to go to the fucking courthouse to testify. And conveniently, they're like, "Oh, he had a bullet hole," and said he killed himself. And yet, everything also, when you paid attention to it, the bullet hole was fucking through like the back corner of his head, through the
Oh
other
my
side, and he's
gosh.
sitting in his driver's seat too, which is especially dumb. Of course, they planted the gun in the car. It's just like fuck off, you know.
Yeah, come
And
on.
and he had already called out about the first guy who got killed. He had already called it out publicly. He's like, this is, he 100% was killed. He was not. He did not commit suicide. That's blatantly clear. Especially timing, everything else. I knew the guy. I had indirectly corresponded with him while working for Boeing. Well, us both working for him. No way. And then, I think he mentioned he was threatened or something like that at one point too. It's like, this is clear intimidation tactics to try to get the rest of us to climb up and not say anything and not testify anymore. And then conveniently he shows up with a bullet hole in his head the same day.
Wow.
And that's when all these, like I said, all the things from his family and some of his colleagues, former colleagues and friends, were like, he wasn't suicidal at all. He was extremely happy. He was extremely confident. He was actually more determined than ever with the killing of the other guy. Bring everything forward and expose him. And that's why obviously he died. He was killed, because also the bullet hole where it went through his head is clearly execution. It's not, he didn't do that to himself. There's like a whole bunch of other things. It was a long enough ago now, though, that I don't remember all the details. I'd have to look it back up again. But basically, it was that, and then like there was some sort of I think he wrote, like, he journaled, especially from the point where the first guy got killed. Immediately, he started documenting and journaling everything and all of his thoughts because he wanted to make sure that there was a record that he was not suicidal. And of course, it was easily located and found, and it was proven he was not suicidal. And so at others, he was killed. And he literally said in it, if I show up dead within the few days of the trial or the day of, no, I'm not suicidal. Wow. And that I was killed. And like, cause he knew he fucking knew it would happen. And so that's what really popularized the blank is not suicidal. Like the recent Hassan Piker stuff with his dog Kaya, right? The shock collar shit. That's where the meme started getting used again, where it's like, Kaya is not suicidal. Or like, remember, the dog is not suicidal. And then of course it changed to show that, and there was never a dog in the first place. There was no dog. Which is the next natural progression in that story, and that the fucking bullshit that Hassan was pulling. Like, okay, it wasn't. I didn't shock her. Okay, it wasn't a shock collar though. It was a vibrating collar. Okay, it was a shock collar, but the prongs were removed. What's the next progressive step? There was never a dog in the first place. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what you're talking
about. There was never a dog in the first place. No, that's just a mink or something.
It's so stupid. All of it kind of ties into each other, yeah. Well, I can't remember how we got into the mentioning of the government, how they...
No.
Because you said geographically. Oh, yeah, right. People with that do data and statistics and analytics and, research and everything that output papers, they're often intimidated.
Yes.
Especially if they do not accept the money that they're being pressured to take to produce a particular result. They will get their lives threatened.
Yes.
Very frequent. It happens way more frequently than people realize, especially in the U.S. The U.S. is easily probably one of the most consistent places that happens. It's just that people around here are so self-preserving and arrogant that of course they're gonna fucking choose the cowardice, and they're gonna be like, okay, fine, I'll produce whatever, I'll say whatever you want, or I just won't testify, or I won't say whatever I'm gonna say. That's why also a lot of times they'll also just, like, if it's a court case, they just pull out of the court case suddenly. Yes. They're like, yeah, you know what, or they'll denounce what they supposedly had as evidence, and they'll be like, I fabricated, I lied. It's like, no, you didn't, and we know you didn't, because especially if it involves a big corporation or it involves the government, that's because you got intimidated, and we already fucking know that. You got threatened, your family got threatened, and you don't want to risk it. You actually literally being killed. And then your reputation being completely fucking obliterated by the government and the corporation in the process because you didn't blick their boots and suck their dick and do as you were told. Exactly. It's the most US, it's literally a US standard procedure is what it is. It's really stupid.
Or Russian oligarchs in that case.
It happens way more frequently in the U.S. though.
True.
It's just that it's more particular in Russia usually than it is here. Here it's like it's a free for all. If you have any evidence to prove corruption, bullshit, and all that, they will fucking do that. Especially if it's a bigger governmental thing or project or corporate thing. But like in the regards to fabricated statistics, it's literally the easiest thing to do because even if you have no motivation to do it, if you're fucking bored, anybody with access to data or numbers can literally just immediately alter them and fucking input whatever. Import. It's a mix of insert and impertinent. Impregnant. But yeah, they can input whatever the fuck they want. But like that's what TriMet and the IBR did recently. Like the IBR, I actually just today, when we're recording this, Sunday, the 18th of January, 2026, I had just output a video that I had recorded. It was actually like a 3.25 hour recording, but I edited it down to 1 hour and 12 minutes. With only like the most summarized, important, detailed like summary and history of the IBR, especially, and thus ODOT and Tina Kotek's sport tampon in chief of Oregon. And and I covered and exposed and explained the history of all the corruption and everything else, conflicts of interest and everything else with that. And like what the reason why I made that video is because finally all these experts in these fields, they're finally fucking saying and echoing everything I've said since its inception about it. Every last detail just about, including that it is literally just the reanimated corpse of the CRC, the Columbia River Crossing. They're all agreeing also that it's now dead, or that if it's not dead, it's about to be killed, because they were withholding for 3.5 years. They lied through their teeth to the states, to the voters, to the board that they serve. They kept lying and saying, we don't have the new cost estimate numbers and projections. And they said that for 3.5 years straight, and they kept asking for an extension. So the December 2023, December 2024, and now December 2025. They kept showing up with absolutely nothing, and then they're like, can we have another extension? They're basically like my dad with fucking credit card debt and tax debt, but just in perpetual extension. Like we don't have the capability to give you those cost projections. But a journalist, Jaquise, I can't remember. I don't know if that's his first or last name, with the Oregon Journalism Project. He actually was 27 years with Willamette Week, and then he joined this independent organization called the Oregon Journalism Project. He got inside, and he found out that from the inside of IVR, they did have a complete cost projection analysis completed and ready to go for the December meeting. They finished it in I think August of 2025. So months ahead of the fucking meeting where they were supposed to give the new cost estimate, and they lied and said, we still don't have a cost estimate. We still need a lot more time. Can we get another year extension? And he goes and digs in immediately and finds out that they lied about that, and they had it the whole time from at least August. And so he released that as a result to the public, right? So it's a leak. And it tripled from 2022. So 3.5 years later, it tripled in price. So they had claimed it was going to be originally, when they first launched and officially legally in 2019. The graphic, I show it in the chart for the price increases. I show actually in that video. So you want to, and so those articles, all these different articles from all these different places, the Urbanist, City Observatory, Clark County Today, obviously the Oregon Journalism Project, Willamette Week, they all fucking have it on there too. So if you want to verify it, you can go look at it. It was $3 billion in 2019. It was projected to be $6 billion, I believe, in 2022.
Yeah.
And now it's $17.7 billion in 3.5 years. And they lied and withheld that, saying we didn't have it. Yes, you fucking did. Clearly. So, fuck you. And of course, in that video, I also explain how, like, Greg Johnson, an example of another place of their corruption, Greg Johnson, who was the lead administrator, the CEO for IBR since its inception, until he jumped ship like the rat that he is in October of last year, 2025. He, as soon as he was hired from a contractor for these kind of projects, WSP, to run the IBR then subsequently, immediately thereafter, decided to hire WSP, who is the VP of, before they poached him from it and then hired him for IBR to lead it. The IBR then, immediately after he gets instated, hires his fucking firm he just left as the VP of. Not just a conflict of interest, major corruption. There's so many other examples I could give. So yeah, I guess in that case, we're both gonna officially end this episode here. Opt to do that so we can save some more stuff for the next episode.
Yes.
And another fitting reason why it's called Off the Cuff is because we don't have a schedule for when we record these or when we output them. So that's even better, which also means it's better for you if you subscribe on YouTube. Because guess what that means? You don't get harassed nonstop for notifications.
Yes.
It's actually going to be intermittent and relatively uncommon, probably. Like 2 episodes a month, maybe, on average, is probably what it's going to be. So, there you go. And we'll talk about, obviously, as you can tell, just about anything.
Yes.
Especially that interests us. But yeah, so, thank you for showing up to our first ever launch episode of Off the Cuff. Subscribe. Or don't. It's your choice. Do get hit by a truck for all. If you want to get hit by a truck, you can do that too. I mean, like, it's no big deal. Anyway, hope to see you whatever our next episode
Yes.
will be. Until next time, stay safe or don't. Again, it's your choice. And I hope the cat distribution system blesses you with a new sack of vibrating fur.
Yes. The kitty. As it
been.
purrs.
I have been Danny.
This is Sean.
And we'll see you on the next episode of Off the Cuff.